Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, and November the 4th, I believe it is. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And that's the third, actually, today. The chat room's open, and I did pop a link into what we're talking about. We're looking at Soul Expressions Abuse Recovery. It's a website put out by Becky, and she's a therapist and a counselor. She's also a survivor, and she's got some great information there, mainly dealing with child sexual abuse or sexual abuse. And I'm mainly interested in the inner child healing work that she has on her pages, but she has a lot of great information there. So I hope everybody will check it out. And that's www.soul-expressions-abuse-recovery. So if you just type into your browser Soul Expressions Abuse Recovery, it should come up. And it's a great website, so I hope everybody take a look. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And every day I say the same thing. I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to my shows. I do a lot of shows, and it's hard to keep up with. Hard for me to keep up with, so I know it's hard for everybody else. And I appreciate you spending this 2 years with me. That's just awesome. And so we'll get right into the topic. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio, so you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a very sensitive subject. And, it may trigger survivors, and it could make you feel uncomfortable. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to. You have to be able to make those decisions for yourself. And if you think the topics of abuse might bother you, then you need to turn the show off, right? So you have to listen at your own discretion. Young children, this is not for you. This is anyone under the age of 18 and under. I just ask that you have an adult, a parent, mom, dad, or somebody that you know who's an adult who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not to my shows, right? My shows are definitely not for younger children. They're adult-oriented, mature audience, and so I always put a discretionary warning on my shows, and you need to have someone, give you permission and listen to the show with you if you're going to listen to my show, right? Because age appropriately, like I don't know who's listening to my shows out here on Blog Talk, out here in the world of the World Wide Web, So, make the right choices for yourself and keep yourself safe, right? So we'll get right into the topic, and we're looking at healing your inner child from soulexpressionsabuse-recovery.com. And we were talking yesterday, really just at the beginning of the page, at the top of the page, and she says when you were sexually abused as a child, you usually don't tell anyone out of fear. And many of us grew up in just dysfunctional homes with dysfunctional parents, and maybe we were victims of incest. So she said if that was true, we were definitely probably too afraid to tell the non-offending parent out of fear that they might blame us for the abuse. And so that's what I was talking about yesterday, is really going into that. She said maybe our parents were around us much. They could have been out drinking, working, or just out of touch with us. Whatever the reason, the communication wasn't there. So she says if we thought the abuse was our fault, what a huge burden for a child to carry. If we had parents that had unhealed childhood wounds, like maybe they had been sexually abused themselves, they could not love in a healthy way because they didn't know how. And we could feel that something was wrong but couldn't identify it. She says if we were not receiving love from our parents at a young age, we were carrying around feelings of extreme unworthiness and totally feeling unlovable. And even though we were victims of abuse, somehow we managed to survive by adapting to whatever the environment we were in was, whatever the environment was that we were in, right? So that's what she's talking about there. And, I do a whole lot of work with John Bradshaw's books, Homecoming, Reclaiming Your, and Healing Your Inner Child, as well as Healing the Shame That Binds You. Both those books from John Bradshaw, and they're both awesome. They're both workbooks. I had no idea. I just thought they were books to read and, get some good ideas from, but actually they're both really workbooks. They're not necessarily set up as a workbook, but they are. And there's, definite steps to take in there to help ourselves, for inner child healing work, right? And it's just amazing, really good stuff. And also Robert Burney's work, Codependency, The Dance of Wounded Souls, or Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. Robert Burney's awesome. So I did, look at that stuff for, months and months and months. We looked at those, especially Robert Burney's stuff. He's, I learned a lot. Like I really learned a whole lot. I'm still doing that with John Bradshaw's books and just pacing myself through it. And it's good stuff. So what she's talking about here is that our inner children, we learned how to adapt, as children, because you have to. Growing up in any kind of environment, it doesn't matter if it's healthy or if it's unhealthy, a child's going to learn how to adapt to the environment around them, So if we were abused as children, and because I was abused as a child, I just learned how to adapt, how to cope. I completely remember the mind games that were being played in my home when I was a young kid, or especially around the age of 6, 7, 8 years old. There was a whole lot of mind games being played, and everybody had to, we all had to play this game, it was really very bizarre. And I remember all of my actions and behaviors were based on trying to stay on my mom's good side, because my mother was my main abuser. And so I was kind of always always aware of her moods, always aware of what she was going through, what she was dealing with, in order to save myself, from a beating or just from being abused in some way. I'd always be looking at what's going on with mom today. And my reactions would all be based on how she was feeling. So I'd be very cautious, approaching her, at any given time. And if she looked like she was going to be violent, then I would take on a certain role, And if she looked like she was depressed, I'd take on a different role. And we all played that mind game. All of us played those games, those roles, very psychologically damaging. And it's actually really bizarre, how this happens. And a child is very smart. Children are very smart. They know what's going on around them. A lot of times parents think that the kids aren't paying attention, that they're, because a lot of times they'll say, oh, you need to clean your room, or you need to take out the trash, or whatever their jobs are to do around the house. And kids won't do it, and the parents say, they never listen to me. Well, it's actually has nothing to do with listening. Kids can hear, as long as they don't have hearing impairment, they can hear. If they just don't want to do the chores, then they're not going to do it. But they listen, and they know what's going on, and they don't even have to hear any verbal communication. They see what's going on through the parents' moods and actions and the energy that's coming off of their parents. Children are very smart. They know what's going on. They're not stupid. And I knew, because of the violence and the rage and the hatred and the garbage that was going on in my home. I was very much aware of what to look out for. What to watch in my parents' moods. It was very, very damaging to have to deal with that. And I know, growing up then later on, I was still doing that, even as a teenager, and I actually do that even now as an adult. I'm watching everybody around me, watching their moods, not as carefully as I was when I was younger. You know what I mean? So I know that people out here in the world today, my boss and anybody I happen to be working for. I actually work for a lot of different people all the time. So it's not just one boss in 10 years. I have lots of different jobs because I do contract work. And so, I know that these people aren't my mother. They're not my dad. They're not going to beat on me. They're not going to hurt me. They're not going to sexually use me. You know what I mean? These people are just, average people. But I still have a tendency to watch their moods, because I'm always looking to adjust myself according to their moods. And that's just being programmed to do that, trained to do that, right? It's a very harsh situation for kids to be in. And, she says the older we became, the better we became at adapting. So she said we did what we had to do to protect our wounded hearts and survive in a sometimes completely chaotic situation. So she said if the sexual or physical abuse continued, the trauma and emotions were buried. So we dissociated, used defense mechanisms, and adapted until adulthood, when we somehow escaped the environment. So that's just the truth of it right there. The abuse, especially in my situation, it wasn't a situation where, we were abused for 6 months out of our life and that was it. Maybe, a lot of times, there'll be a step parent come in and, a parent remarries and then a step parent is abusive or something, and then the other parent finally rises up and divorces that other abusive parent, and then the abuse stops. Sometimes that happens to children. And that's traumatic enough, but we were just brought up in this mess. I was born into it. And so it just continued on and on and on, and it was my life. That's my life, and I had to deal with it, and I didn't even question it. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like seeing people get hurt, because I knew what it was like to be hurt. A child who understands that if you put your finger too close to a flame, it's going to hurt. You're going to burn yourself, and it's going to hurt. It's the same with a parent beating on you or something. You know that hurts. So then when you see your parents beating on each other or beating on one of your siblings, then you're like, oh, you know the pain of that, right? And so, it was incredibly damaging. Or if your parent shames and makes you feel bad, verbally assaults you, or, and screams at you, you know what I mean, and causes you a lot of fear, and you end up backing up into a corner, crouching, just thinking, oh my God, a verbal assault, coupled with a physical assault, then the damage done from the verbal stuff, and, emotionally, psychologically, what that does to a child. So you see that going on around you all the time, and, you're aware that it's wrong and it shouldn't be happening, and yet it's your life. Right, so you have to deal with it. It was, I had to wake up every day. Me and my sister, when we were talking, we used to actually talk a lot about that. We didn't, we never really got into sitting around hashing out too much stuff, but we would mention the fact that both of us had to get up and go to school the next day. And my sister was like, it was extremely hard to get up and go to school the next day and pull yourself together, start a new day, trying to start a new day fresh, because there was no way for us to start a new day fresh, because our family was just cyclically on this road to hell. You know what I mean? It was like it was just this depressive, abusive, violent, just a hurtful place to be. And so we'd roll out of bed and have to go to school the next day, just knowing, the night before was just a nightmare, and face the day the next day as a school age child. And then coming home, not knowing what's going to be happening when you get home, just the fear and the anxiety of, oh God, is somebody going to kill somebody? Is my mother going to kill my dad? Or is my dad going to kill my mother? Or is my mother going to beat me when I get home? Because chances are that was the case for me. Just always this, and still walking up to the steps of the house and going in after school. You just have to deal with it. So, she's so right, about that so many times, to abused children. You just have to just get up and do it, and it's just the way that it is. And so we learn how to adapt. We learn how to put in these defense mechanisms, possibly dissociate, which I did for the child sexual abuse. I actually did dissociate, and all kinds of stuff that we'll do to protect ourselves, because it's too hard. It's too hard. It's too hard on a child, Like I was already being physically abused and verbally and mentally, psychologically battered, really suffering from battered child syndrome, And when my brother sexually abused me when I was 8 years old, I didn't have anywhere to put that. I was like, okay, I'm already trying to survive here in this home, under my mother's wrath, And so where does this go, Like it was just more physical damage to my body, you know what I mean? Like being raped and sodomized. There's just more physical damage. It's just, it was horrific, But in the meantime, I didn't know what to do with it. As an 8-year-old, I was just like, okay, that doesn't fit in anywhere. You know what I mean? So I have to just basically pretend that didn't happen. And because it went on for about 7 months, I really had to be able to, probably to protect myself, I had to go away. You know what I mean? Like part of myself had to not be there, because of the pain and the torture and the just being bound and gagged and being, sexually violated, right? And so it was incredibly hard, as a young child to be dealing with that. And then what do you do with it later? It just stayed buried, because I was like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm already dealing with trying to stay alive here. I'm already dealing with trying to not kill myself, even as a young adult, or trying not to overdose or try, because that was, something that I was headed for, a road, of possible death by drug overdose, because I was always doing way too many drugs. And then I finally got off the drugs, and I had to still, keep that stuff buried because I didn't want to face it. It's like, oh no, I've already had to face a whole lifetime of abuse. I really don't want to face that other stuff. The rape and the sodomy. It was just too much for me. It was too much for me as a child, and it was too much for me as an adult. Until I don't know about I'd say at some point in this last 2 years, I realized that I was going to have to face it. I think it was about 6 months into the shows, so it would have been possibly springtime of 2010, where I was really aware of the fact that I was going to have to I was really going to have to face this, you know what I mean? Because it was going to haunt me for the rest of my life. And I thought, I know what happened to me as a child. You know what I mean? I know I was raped and sodomized, but I mean, do I really want to face it? Do I really want to take it out and look at it and grieve it and mourn it and help my inner child from so long ago who got, who was actually just left in that mess? My inner self who was I just locked the door. I shut the door on her and I locked it and I was like, goodbye. I was really stuck at that point, an 8-year-old being sexually abused. I was stuck at that point, my whole life. And I knew that I had that part of myself in there that I had to deal with, that I was going to have to acknowledge that little person that I was, that little girl, who didn't know how to handle that situation, you know what I mean? There was nothing I could do. My brother was 21 years older. He was 21 years old. He was 13 years older than me. And he was a grown man, you know what I mean? There was absolutely no way I could protect myself. He gagged me so I couldn't scream, and even if I would have screamed, it wouldn't have made a difference. My parents didn't care. My dad was raping my mother, and I think my dad raped my brother, and that's why I think he did what he did to me. My family was very sick and twisted. And so, I thought, man, I'm gonna have to face this stuff if I really want to get through it, if I really want to heal, And so, but I did this not really on my own. I had some help from Gypsy Witch, doing guided visualizations and really setting me up a safe place. She worked with me to do that, and that was really all part of Beverly Cyril's work. And Beverly Cyril is going to be on my show on Friday night. She's from Australia, and she's worked with so many survivors. She's got some major background, clinical background really, of working with survivors and people with DID, PTSD, people who have survived traumatic childhoods, whether it be abuse or whatever, and who have had a hard time coping. And her stuff, her line, her work, and she actually came up with and founded Forget Talking Therapy, because she's done so much work in the field of visualizations and guided imagery, using pictures instead of words to heal. And actually, I have to say, I think talk therapy for me has been very helpful, but I have to then also give her a lot of credit, because visualizations actually did help me out a lot. And that's kind of what actually has been the turning point in my healing journey for inner children. And, even John Bradshaw is like, he talks a whole lot about visualizations and using, guided imagery to get ourselves to a safe place. Because when I went in to rescue my inner self of my inner 8-year-old, she was still on the bed, she was still tied up, she was still bound and gagged, and she was still bleeding. That's where I was left at as an 8-year-old after being raped and sodomized, and that's where she was. She was still, that little part of myself was still suffering from that rape and that violent sexual assault. That she was still there, and she had never been rescued. She was still there. Nobody got any help for her, and I just ignored her. I was like, you know what, I can't even deal with you. I'm trying to deal with all this other stuff, so I got no time for you. And I just shut the door on her, And so when I went in to actually rescue her a few months ago, it was amazing. It really was. I could see myself sitting next to myself on that bed, and, I could see myself, talking to her, which was myself. And I said, you know what, we're okay now, and he can't hurt you anymore. He can never come back and hurt you, right, because he's dead, because my brother, my abuser, killed himself at the age of 33. And so, he can never come back and hurt us again. So I had to convince her, that there was no possible way that could ever happen to her again, and that I was here to protect her, and I would help her to get through it. That was me talking to myself, saying, we can do this, and I'm in a safe place now. We're in a safe place. So I got her out of that bedroom, thank God, because I know exactly, I was 8 years old. Come on, I got cognitive memories. I have body memories as well, right? So I got all kinds of all kinds of things I had to work through. But I got her out of that room. I got her to a safe place, and she's so much happier. Now she's doing so much better. You know what I mean? And she's in such a better place. And that's myself from so long ago. Just not receiving any help. Being raped and sexually used. It was absolutely horrific. It never should have happened. And now part of myself, really my adult self, is trying to make sense of, the effects that it had on my life, and trying to, now what I'm trying to do is heal from that and say, you know what, okay, the reason that I remained so protective of myself and wouldn't let anybody touch me, well, there you go. It wasn't just because my mother was beating on me and all this. It had a lot to do with the sexual abuse that I suffered. And, I didn't want a man to touch me. You know what I mean? It's like, but then I wanted to be a woman, so I've kind of gone back and I've taken a look at, how that affected my life, and the decisions that I made because of the abuse that I suffered, right? And lots of interesting decisions which were all set up to protect myself, which actually caused me to miss out on a lot in life. And it's quite unfortunate, but what are you going to do? You know what I mean? It's like I can't go back and change the clocks, But what I can do is go forward, and I can, learn that a lot of my decisions are made based on my inner children, and that's what they're talking about here, Like when we're letting our inner children run our lives, basically. A lot of people who have been so wounded in childhood, will allow their children to basically make all the decisions. It's like, oh no, we can't get into that relationship because we can't let anybody get that close. That's our inner children speaking out, saying, they're going to hurt us, because in a child's mind, because everybody was hurting me, you know what I mean? My parents were hurting me. My brother had hurt me. My other siblings weren't all that great to me. One of my other brothers was slapping me around all the time and, more physically abusive. My sister was really quite abusive in her own way. She was always hitting me and punching my legs and calling me names and just that kind of bullying stuff, And then, and because they saw my mother doing this, they saw my dad doing this, and they were abused. So, right, that's what siblings will do. They'll just take on the behaviors in the home, right? We were all doing that. And I was the youngest. I was also very small. You know what I mean? I was a tiny kid because I was not healthy. I wasn't well. Came into the world sickly. Never really developed any kind of weight until I got older. And so I was really quite tiny and sort of fragile up until I got to be about 13 years old. I started to my body started to fill out, I started to get some weight on me, and I started to, actually look a lot more like I do right now. But before that, I was really quite tiny and small and not all that well. And, I'd been raped and sodomized as a child, and an infection set in, and I was very sick. My mother didn't care. My mother was always beating on me. She didn't care. She didn't care if I showed up to work. To work, I would say to work. I've been working for so long, work is just on my brain. She didn't care if I showed up to school with bruises on my face or a fat lip or whatever. I'd have to sit in the classroom, trying to look all, unobvious, with my hand over my face, trying to, or my hair pulled down over my face so that nobody could see my face, because my mother would just rearrange my face all the time. She didn't care. And she was like, I don't care what, just tell the teacher I hit you and tell her I'll hit you again. That was my mother, because she didn't care if she lost me if the courts intervened and took me, because my mother didn't want me anyway. So she was, when she went to the court, when they were brought up on child abuse charges. I talk about this a lot because it just pisses me off. My mother went to the courts and begged and pleaded the courts that they wouldn't take the children. She's like, don't take my children, they're all I have, because she didn't want to look like the bad mother, because she was pointing the finger at my dad, saying it was all my dad. And my dad was pointing the finger at my mother, saying, oh, it's all their mother. Their mother's the one who's abusing them. And then my mother was like, it's all their dad. Their father is the one who's abusing them, right? And my mother wanted to look like the good mother, so she's like, don't take our children. I love my children and all this, right? And, the courts were like, well, if they're going to stay in the home, then you guys have to make some changes. You guys have to go to counseling and all this stuff, right? And so that's why my mother, she didn't care if she lost me. She didn't care if the courts intervened again and took me out of the home. So she would just beat the shit out of me, and she didn't care. If I went to school looking like a mess, she didn't care, because she didn't care if the system got involved again. They didn't do any jail time the first time, so why would they do any jail time, the second time? She knew she could get away with it, And so that's the sad part, is that so many times people, parents and stuff, they don't care if they hurt their children. And they figure, what are they going to do to me? I don't care. Going to take you kids? Fine, because I don't want you anyway. That was my mom's attitude, And so she didn't care, And so growing up in that, it was a pretty harsh situation. And so, it was incredibly damaging. And, to try to have to deal with all of that all the time, year after year after year, starts to wear on you psychologically. And basically that's what happened to my mother, because she was abused as a child and then got into this abusive marriage. But then that's not an excuse for what she did to us. You know what I mean? It's not an excuse for what she did to me, period. You know, so there's no excuse for that kind of stuff. But Becky says here on our website, the older we became, the better we became at adapting. So she says, we did what we had to do to protect our wounded hearts and survive in a sometimes completely chaotic situation. So she says an adult with a wounded child inside is an adult who never healed from their abuse. They either ignored it and suppressed it or acted it out in unhealthy ways, she says here. She says, regardless, you have learned along the way from your childhood, number 1, you can't trust adults. Number 2, life isn't safe. Number 3, my parents can't protect me. Number 4, I'm alone. Number 5, God doesn't love me, and many other negative things. Well, isn't that the truth? That's exactly what I've been talking about for the last 2 years. I mean, that sums it up right there. You know, it's like you can't trust adults. You can't trust anybody. You know what I mean? This is what my inner children think. They just totally don't trust anybody, and they're like, you know, you can't trust anybody. They're going to hurt us, right? And that's sad, because I've learned as an adult that, you know, I've actually been able to make a lot of relationships and friendships where, you know, yeah, I can trust people. I want to be trusted. I want to prove myself trustworthy. So I got to give other people the benefit of the doubt too. You know, it's like some people, there are bad people out there, absolutely. But when I was a kid, everybody was bad. You know what I mean? I mean, I really didn't trust anybody. I used to look around and I had some of my friends' parents were some sort of a good example for me, you know, that there were good people on the planet. But I wasn't so sure, because I was like, well, I don't know. You know, like I haven't experienced really very much good stuff, so I don't think there's that many good people out there. And you know, part of me still says that, right? Life isn't safe, that's another one. That's a huge issue. You know, my life was not safe. And growing up in that situation, I had all kinds of weird stuff happen to me in the meantime, which was attempted kidnaps by strangers, because I was always out on the streets running around. And I was talking about that last night on my show. And just being out where I shouldn't be, you know what I mean, partying and stuff at a really young age. And also walking to the store. Just always doing stuff on my own. And had some attempted kidnaps, which really were kidnaps, except for I was saved, really. Thank God. And so at the time I didn't think that, but now I do. So life isn't safe. That's a huge thing for me, because I know life isn't safe. You know what I mean? I know firsthand how unsafe life really is. You know, I mean, my parents were two of the most unsafe people to be around. And so, you know, when you grow up like that, you grow up in a home where, you know, it's just unsafe to be in your own home. It was unsafe to be in my bed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you know, as an 8-year-old, it's like, okay, in my mind, what that told me was, it's not even safe for me to be in my own body, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's not safe for me to exist, because I can't even be in my own bed. And that's what a child who's being sexually abused will go through. It's unsafe. You can't even sleep well. You can't, and I could never sleep well before the abuse anyway, before the child sexual abuse and sexual assaults, because my parents were always fighting at night. That was their best time to fight, because my dad would be trying to force himself on my mother, because my mother wouldn't sleep with him. She wouldn't have sex with him because she wasn't supposed to. The doctors told her, man, you can't be doing this stuff anymore. You're going to die, you know. She was so really so physically fragilely sick. She wasn't like so weak sick. She was very strong. She had too many surgeries is what the problem was. And they said, you know, one more surgery and we're not going to be able to help you, because one more surgery is going to mean, you know, that your body isn't going to be able to handle the surgery, because we can't even sew it back up. That was a serious problem with my mother. She had so many surgeries that they couldn't even find any skin left to sew back up, and they were like, we can't help you next time. Like, next time you're just going to die. You know, so my dad would be raping her and forcing him. I was like, and so I hated him. When I was 9 years old, I went in with my pink plastic jumbo bat and I smashed him in the head with it. And yeah, I literally hated my dad. I was like, you know, he was trying to kill my mother, you know what I mean, as far as I was concerned. And which he was. He didn't care. He didn't care if my mother would have died, because he raped her and sexually assaulted her. He was always doing that. And if the brothers weren't around to save her, right, so that was our job, you know what I mean, to try to save my mother, right. Absolutely horrific, you know, situation for children to grow up in. But I know that my case is not, you know, that special. I know what people, I have had so many friends in my lifetime growing up and in this world that I know have come from horrific situations, You know what I mean? And that's why I'm out here to try to stop this stuff, right? That's why I'm out here being a public vocal voice saying, you know what, no, this is not right. It's not right at all. So, we'll have to pick up the rest of this tomorrow morning. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll actually finish this up tomorrow. I want to kind of go back through the parts, number 4 and number 5, I am alone, and number 5, God doesn't love me, and many other negative things. I want to kind of continue on from there. So we'll take that back up tomorrow morning. So, if you can't cope and you're having a hard time, I say this on almost every show, it's your responsibility to get help. I realized that 4.5 years ago when I was going to kill myself and self-injure. I was going to gouge myself, and I was going to have to end up in the hospital because I was seriously going to wound myself. And then I was thinking, well, I'll plan my suicide again. 4.5 years ago, let me tell you what, I made a decision. I said, okay, no, never again. My parents are not going to win this fight. My brother's not going to win this fight. I'm going to win because I'm going to stay alive. I'm going to have a good life, right? This was a huge responsibility that I had to take on because I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. All I know is I was going to kill myself. And 4.5 years ago, I made the decision to stick it out and get some help, right? That's what I want to encourage other people to do. You stick around, you know what I mean? Because if you give up and you give in, basically what you've done is said, okay, my abusers win. Yep, they destroyed me. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, that is so wrong. I got mad. I was like, no way, my parents are not winning this fight. There is no way. Because by me staying alive and having a good life is a huge slap in the face to my parents. My mother's passed away now, but it doesn't matter. It's still a slap in their face. It's like, yeah, you wanted to kill me and you wanted to see me go down, and you tried to kill me and you hurt me so incredibly bad, and and you allowed my brother to hurt me so incredibly bad. And you know what? I'm fine. Yep. And I've got some awesome friends, and I have a great life going right now, and I'm taking care of myself. I'm taking care of things. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have a good life, and I'm going to enjoy this life. And you could not destroy me, you could not kill me, and you could not get me to kill myself. And that's such a burn on them. That makes me so happy to do this. That's why I'm just saying to you guys, do not ever give up. Not ever. You know what I mean? It's not an option. Just make it not an option. You keep fighting until you get what you need. You keep fighting, and you never ever give up, right? Because we so deserve to have a good life and to heal and to go on and move forward, right? And it won't happen if we give up. So don't ever give up. Keep that fight alive, you know what I mean? Have a great day, everybody, and take good care of yourselves. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.